Okay, this is interesting. Seems fun. What is Looksmaxxing? Is my negative tilt disgusting? How do I ascend? Does my face card decline? Do I mog? How is my forward growth? Where do I get steroids? Should I be bone How's smashing? My mid-face ratio? How much TRT is enough to... When did all these boys get so pretty? Hey, wait a second. What's going on? Where am I? What was that? Hey, you. What's going on? What is this place? Imagine, if you will, a mouse universe. A universe not only of mouse sight and mouse sound, but of mouse mind. A journey into an itty-bitty land whose teeny tiny boundaries are that of mouse imagination. That's the tiny signpost up ahead. Our next stop, the Universe 25. On May 11th, 1917, it seemed the world as we know it was crumbling. But as the tanks rolled over the trenches of the European theater, Mr. Stork delivered a blessing to the little whistle stop, Elkton, Tennessee. That blessing's name was John Bumpus Calhoun, the middle child of James and Fern Calhoun, a high school principal and an artist. The Calhouns didn't know it yet, but their baby boy was going to change a very, very specific sect of social sciences forever. John was a quiet boy. His parents moved a lot, and it was difficult to make friends, but he could always find a familiar solace in the natural world around him. And so, from a young age, a fascination developed. A fascination that would eventually blossom into a lifelong preoccupation. In 1939, John P. Calhoun took his first steps towards the academic world. He completed his bachelor's degree at the University of Virginia, shortly followed by his master's degree and PhD from Northwestern University. It was here at Northwestern that Calhoun first scientifically documented the subject of his intrigue, a thesis on the 24-hour rhythms of the Norway rat. At some point, in between long days at the rodent lab and late nights at the mammalogy section of the library, Calhoun discovered another lifelong preoccupation, his soon-to-be wife, Edith Gressley. After graduation, the two shacked up, packed their bags, and headed for Baltimore, Maryland, where Calhoun humbly finds work as an assistant on the Rodent Ecology Project at Johns Hopkins University. The city of Baltimore bankrolls Calhoun and Company so they can complete a study that will theoretically improve urban pest control. So the crew uses a bunch of poison to kill some rats, but they notice that when the poisoning stops, the population always rebounds to roughly 150 rats per block. Very strange. Calhoun's gears start turning, and it's at this point that he undertakes his first major experiment. In 1947, Calhoun embarks on a 28-month study on a colony of Norway rats that will change the behavioral sciences forever. He cobbles together a 10,000 square foot outdoor pen enclosed by a big fence unclimbable by the likes of rats, whilst also preventing any predators from getting inside. In the center of the pen is a hub with unlimited food and water. Leading out from this hub are pathways to 9 different nesting boxes, each with ample nest building supplies. The nesting boxes have one entrance each. Calhoun himself sits above and observes from his sneako chair a raised observation tower in the middle of the pen. He, a benevolent ruler, has generously gifted the Norway rats everything their little rat hearts could possibly desire. So now we sit and wait. The population began with just 5 female rats. Calhoun projected that within 2 years the population would exceed 5,000. However, just like the Baltimore City rats, the population stabilizes around 150 and never actually exceeds 200 rats total. The important takeaway from this initial experiment is a phenomenon that Calhoun calls the behavioral sink. This is the point where population density becomes so great in specific high-traffic areas that it causes a total collapse in regular social behavior. The rats in this population have ample room, but always seem to end up crowding about the same social junctions. As a result of this over-socialization, the rat population sort of abandons its normal functions and society breaks down. This idea of the behavioral sink fascinates Calhoun and will become his area of focus going forward. Don't you want to see your daughter, John? She's hardly a day old. What's the matter with you? I'm fine, Edith. I just can't stop thinking about those rats. In 1951, John and Edith Calhoun move up to Bar Harbor, Maine, where their first daughter, Catherine, or Cat ironically because mice don't like cats, is born. 3 years later, they have a second, a girl named Cheshire, also weirdly a type of cat. Calhoun then lands a prestigious position at the National Institute of Health, where he'll work for 33 years. The family purchases a farm in the country outside of Rockville, Maryland. Here, Calhoun builds himself a lab on the second floor. The rodent stench was described as overpowering. It's perfect. The Room 14 experiment was John B. Calhoun's second attempt at understanding the idea of the behavioral sink. Described in detail in the 1962 Scientific American in an article entitled Population Density and Social Pathology, Calhoun was back at the rat race. This time, Calhoun begins with 32 rats, albino ones, 16 boys and 16 girls. They are placed in 4 rooms separated by electrified dividers, not climbable by rats. There are ramps connecting rooms 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, but there's no connection between room 1 and 2. These are essentially dead ends. In the corner of each room is a little spiral staircase leading to an artificial burrow. Each room also has a little drinking station and a little feeding station, and from above, Calhoun watches everything through a glass ceiling. Now, the little food hoppers are designed in such a way that eating is somewhat arduous and time-consuming, and so the rats are forced into contact with one another. Over time, the rats become accustomed to this and eventually prefer a main social eating spot where the behavioral sink develops. More than half of the rats gather and stay in the middle pens 2 and 3 where the preferred hoppers are located, and they get to the point where they won't even eat unless another rat is eating with them. Once the behavioral sink sets in, society sort of starts to fall apart. The females forget most of their basic maternal roles. They can't make nests, and when they try to transport their young around, they drop their kids off in random spots where they get eaten by the other rats. They had extremely high infant mortality, and most of their unborn kids didn't make it. When in heat, packs of males would chase the females around and ignore any sort of normal mating ritual. See, in the wild, the male rat first pursues the female. She eventually retires to her burrow, and the male politely pokes his head in a few times. Occasionally, he does a little sensual dance on a mound at the mouth of the burrow. Finally, the female will poke her head outside and let the male know that she's ready. In this rat utopia, a hierarchy is forged via combat. The strongest keep to themselves in the farthest quarters 1 and 4. The alpha rats, known as the tyrants, had a burrow mostly to themselves that they shared with a few interlopers and a harem of females. In the dominant male's domain, the mothers were more successful and the infant mortality rate was the lowest. They lived in relative peace. An unusual group that emerges are the probers. These rats are extremely sexual. They followed the females back to their burrow uninvited, totally ignoring normal mating protocol. They'll then often cannibalize the newborns. At the very bottom of the rat hierarchy are what Calhoun calls the somnambulists, the sleepwalkers. These sub-5s are completely passive and ignored by all other rats of both sexes. Invisible to the rat world, they make no passes at the females, and none of the males play with or attack them. Also on the bottom, no pun intended, are the homosexuals, or probably closer to pansexuals. Rats who are so gone they either can't differentiate between or don't care about the orientation of their partner.
You're gay!
In the end, like in the previous experiment, Room 14 creates total population stagnation and a totally inept population. The mortality rate for infants winds up being 96%. But Calhoun's work is cut short, as he's invited out to sunny California. After the publication of the Room 14 experiment's findings in Scientific American, John B. Calhoun becomes something of a hot commodity. He's writing for Stanford, he's consulting for NASA, he's designing prisons in D.C. Invited to present his findings to the Royal Society, he famously opens a speech with, "I shall speak largely of mice, but my thoughts are on man." But even as his star power grew, he couldn't ignore a tiny squeak-like calling from back in Maryland. And so, in 1968, he, with the help of the National Institute of Mental Health, acquired a property in rural Poolesville and set up shop for what was to become his most famous experiment of all, Universe 25. Four pairs of mice enter Universe 25. Their world is a 9-foot square pen surrounded by 4.5-foot walls on each side. Each side housed 16 wire mesh tunnels, each with 4 nesting boxes stacked vertically like an apartment complex. 256 in total, with enough space comfortably for 15 mice each. That's theoretically 3,840 mice total. There is only one entrance per tunnel, a potential point of friction. The water supply and food hoppers are built into the walls also, only accessible by entering one of the tunnels, then making a quick turn. Like in the previous experiment, eating is a lengthy and arduous task and thus forces socialization. The floor is an open space. Once again, there's unlimited food, water, and nesting material. Waste is removed routinely, and there are no predators. Even the weather and lighting are controlled. It is a pure mouse utopia. Calhoun himself waits by the walls of the pen and observes. Out of the gate, the population explodes. By day 315, they've gone from 8 to 620 rats. But a problem begins to arise. Without a quote-unquote normal end to their lives, there are a lot of old mice who aren't dying. As we know, mouse society is hierarchical, much like our own. There are a limited number of socially valued positions of status, and these older mice won't give up theirs to the younger generations. And on top of that, because there are no constraints on birth, during this initial population boom, there are significantly more mice than there are status positions. In nature, the young rats would just immigrate elsewhere, but in Rat Utopia, there's nowhere else for them to go. They are doomed to be statusless chuds forever. The older rats employ a toll-keeping strategy, where they gatekeep the tunnel entrances, which are totally free to them, and try to keep the younger mice out.
Hell no. No. No.
They would police portions of the floor to keep the younger mice constrained to only specific parts of the pen. This period is called the stagnation phase. Growth is slowing. Because social activity is so frequent, the pressures to have some sort of status are immense. Now, a few different things begin to happen. The males, lost without purpose, start developing some strange characteristics. We see the return of a few archetypes. The hypersexual probers and the homosexuals. A huge proportion of the male population becomes totally passive. All day, these NPC mice sit essentially motionless on the pen floor, only moving to eat or drink. But really, there's one particular mouse archetype that catches everyone's attention: the beautiful ones. The beautiful ones are a type of male who have rejected all the social decay of their time, and have focused all their energy on self-improvement. They are not constrained by social norms and are unfazed by the dominant rats and the NPC rats alike. They never attempt to court the females. They never fight on the open floor. Their behavior is limited to eating, sleeping, and grooming. You see, the females in Mouse Utopia, by the stagnation phase, have abandoned all maternal roles. They are hyper-aggressive, attacking the males, other females, and their own young, often totally abandoning them. They forget how to build their nests, forget how to wean their young, and eventually will stop having children altogether. The mortality rate reaches 96%, but the beautiful ones are unbothered. Like the sleepwalkers from Universe 14, they are content to be totally indifferent to their surroundings. They usually spend their day in their dwelling, the top floors of the mouse high-rises. Calhoun even does a test where he pulls some of these beautiful ones out of Universe 25 and places them into a new world with perfectly healthy trad mice. They still won't engage. Entering the next chapter of the experiment, more and more mice will become beautiful ones. The next phase is the die-out phase. The last mouse is conceived on day 600. From this point, there is no reproduction. Eventually, all mice lose meaning, the population dwindles, and after over 1,500 days, all of the mice have died. Calhoun publishes his experiment as Death Squared, the Explosive Growth and Demise of a Mouse Population, an article released by the Royal Society of Medicine in 1973. In it were given his thoughts on the whole situation. For an animal so simple as a mouse, the most complex behaviors involve the interrelated set of courtship, maternal care, territorial defense, and hierarchical intergroup and intergroup social organization. When behaviors related to these functions fail to mature, there is no development of social organization and no reproduction. As in the case of my study reported above, all members of the population will eventually die. The species will die out. For an animal so complex as man, there is no logical reason why a comparable sequence of events should not also lead to species extinction. If opportunities for role fulfillment fall short of the demand of those capable of filling the roles and having expectancies to do so, only violence and disruption of social organization can follow. Individuals born under these circumstances will be so out of touch with reality as to be incapable even of alienation. Their most complex behaviors will become fragmented. Just as biological generativity in the mouse involves this species' most complex behaviors, so does ideational generativity for man. Loss of these respective complex behaviors means death of the species.
Bro, look at it. Did you see that? Should we tell him? So bad. Oh my gosh. That's not funny.
Do not listen to that.
Thank you, man.
I know how it feels.
This could happen to anybody. Don't let it be you. Subscribe now to Pub Crawl Press for more history. Now back to the video.
I'm sexy and I know it.
In 1971, John B. Calhoun publishes another paper entitled Space and the Strategy of Life. Calhoun understands that as time progresses, our society will succumb to the same forces that his rat utopias did. How does the modern man find meaning and status in a world where those things are limited constraints? Well, as population sinks develop and physical space becomes more competitive, Calhoun posits that humans adapt not by expanding territory, but increasing the complexity of specialized, symbolic, and conceptual systems. Humanity, in effect, must create a theoretical net of interconnectivity, some sort of interweb of human consciousness. But what Calhoun couldn't have possibly imagined was that this same interweb would give rise to exactly the type of monsters he was trying to avoid. John B. Calhoun would pass in the fall of 1995. His work has undoubtedly colored our understanding of the social dynamics via which we're constrained. There are times when it feels like our world is a perfect replica of the mouse universes Calhoun created, but only time will tell if our fate will be the same. It's not crazy to assume that our modern behavioral sinks have spawned some new archetypes, similar to those who appeared in Calhoun's experiments. Let's examine a few of those rat tropes and see if we can't identify some parallels. Now, the first type of rat that really started to develop were the dominant ones. And although in some sense they were physically dominant over the other rats, their authority really came from their ability to guard their resources and hold on to status. These alpha rats guarded the entrances to the nests, gatekept the other resources, and maintained their leadership positions well into their advanced age. They were the descendants of the earliest, greatest generation. They really didn't have to actually build the society, but they did get to reap the rewards of the period of growth and prosperity. And again, one of those benefits was that they got to live really, really long. For those reasons, I think the closest parallel archetype in our society is the boomers. You might not like it, but the boomers do embody all the traits of an absolute alpha. Raw physical strength from a life of consuming food before they took all the tests out. A light beer-fueled, unwavering self-assuredness. Incredible real estate portfolio. Yes, like it or not, the boomers can't stop winning, and if I were in their position, I'd be right there with them in Margaritaville. Probably the most common archetype, the sleepwalkers were the mice who had totally given up. They spent their days ignored by the world, lying around on the floor of the pen, totally without purpose. They were physically alive, but they've died their first death, the spiritual death. Each day they followed the same route, completed the same, most base tasks, then returned to their mouse gamer chair where they spent the remainder of their free time. They have totally given up. They have no more interest in status or pursuing a mate, and have no prospect of a home in the mouse high-rises. Although there are degrees, there are many modern parallels to these checked-out rodents. People living their lives on autopilot. On the extreme end, there are the NEETs and the robots on 4chan, the forever alones and anti-workers on Reddit, the Discord server degenerates, a population that is only expanding as people feel less and less attachment to society, and as the internet is introduced at a younger and younger age. And if you think there are a lot of sleepwalkers now, just wait. The probers were the rats that totally ignored the rules of engagement for any sort of romantic or intimate encounter. These rats didn't really pursue any normal position in society and didn't contribute to the whole. Instead, they were hyper-aggressive, spending their energy in pursuit of other rats, disrupting the entire colony. Normal courtship in the mouse world involves mutual signals, female receptivity, and so on. These rats would wait in packs to attack the females, whom they would pursue back to their nests, forcefully have their way with, and occasionally kill all the young inside. These forced mounting attempts would sometimes be directed at the males also.
If one man can hold you down, two can rape you.
I think that our modern parallel here is the immigrator class. These rogues have spawn glitched into the Museum of Europe and turned it into a full PvP zone. If you're alone in London or Paris after 5 p.m., watch out for this archetype. You just might fall victim to a prober. In Mouse Utopia, eventually all females lose their ability to complete basic maternal functions. All they know is eat mouse chip and tell mouse lies. There isn't a long explanation for this one, but the parallel is obviously just modern women. An archetype whose sole political motivation is infanticide, who would do anything to prolong raising children of their own, and have no idea how to make one of those windowsill pies with the steam lines any longer. The homosexuals are just the homosexuals. We don't really need an explanation for that one.
Send this to someone who is gay.
Finally, in Universe 25, a hero arises from the disorder. Not content to participate in a clown world with clown prizes, these mice, the beautiful ones, have become so detached from reality that they are incapable of feelings of alienation. There is no humility, there is only one objective, to mog. The beautiful ones spend their time grooming, alone in their quarters for themselves. There's an unspoken agreement between him and the sleepwalkers. Both understand that the only way to fight the system is to be totally indifferent to it. Our parallel today are the Looksmaxxers, a new type of human whose motives are not material gain, but instead aesthetic perfection. Pushing the scientific limits of cosmetic surgery, these peptide-consuming, HGH-taking, anabolic steroid enjoyers spend their days, like the beautiful ones, under meticulously selected lighting in front of the gym mirror. They have created a whole new science, and those truly dedicated are probably giving years of their life in pursuit of it. As we will recall from Calhoun's experiment, the arrival of the beautiful ones is merely an indication of what's to come. What starts with a few indifferent but very good-looking souls will eventually become a huge proportion of our youth, and a society whose individuals have no purpose beyond their own vanity is doomed to expire. In the conclusions of his report on Universe 25, John B. Calhoun describes two deaths that a population experiences. The first is the spiritual death. This comes long before they actually perish. In his estimations, the beautiful ones, sexy as they are, have already experienced this first death. Alive, but spiritually, there is nothing. The second death is a physical one, and a direct result of the first, because no people can survive without their spirit. Perhaps we should heed the warning of Calhoun in this excerpt from the Royal Society of Medicine. This takes us to the fourth horse of the apocalypse. I saw a pale horse, and its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given power over a fourth of the earth, to kill with the sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth. This second death has gradually become the predominant concern of modern medicine. And yet there is nothing in the earlier history of medicine, or in the precepts embodied in the Hippocratic Oath, that precludes medicine from being equally concerned with healing the spirit and healing nations as with healing the body. Perhaps we might do well to reflect upon another of John's transcriptions. He who conquers the first shall not be hurt by the second death. Thank you for watching. What do you think about all these sexy young boys on the internet? I think they're alright. Are you missing out on a social connection? What better way to start a conversation than sharing a link to my YouTube video? And we're looking for status too, so remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a comment. But remember that comment section is not a forum for open discussion. Leave only your best compliment. Thanks again.